Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Waspinator, and welcome back to Total Party Skills. Last night, struck the first great, fantastic benchmark and got 101 subscribers. So that finally makes me, I guess, still bottom-feeding YouTuber scum. I don't know, I mean, it's cool, but it's still just a minuscule drop in the bucket. But hey, for all the new folks, hi, King Waspinator, your old pal. Um, it's like going through like my videos after seeing the news and all that, and breaking out some champagne and having like a night-long raunchy marathon with the old lady in celebration of this fantastic achievement. I was like looking at the data, and apparently what the people want are riffs videos, videos where I trash talk 5th edition, the occasional obscure RPG review of other people's products, Planet Matriarchy, but none of the other games that I've put out. And that's about it. So, politically controversial hot takes on 5e and riffs. Oh, maybe I could make some more Battletech videos, even though, I mean, I'm not really a miniatures wargaming guy, so, like, a little limited on the things to say about that, but I could at least take the opportunity to introduce you new folks out there to my own brand of goodness, the Total Party Skills games. There's 14 various books available, both in PDF on DriveThruRPG, or you can look them up on Amazon and get a print copy. The core rule book ones, you can get hardcover or softcover, and the ones that are just like thin little source books are, paperback only. We got Expedition to Ancient Egypt, which is about kind of basically like your Brendan Fraser mummy kind of scenario, where some archaeologists and explorers from the early 20th century are sent back in time to ancient Egypt right after the collapse of the Bronze Age. It works in a bunch of like supernatural stuff and ancient aliens. It's kind of like a real primitive world of darkness, and just kind of like your classic swords and sandals D&D kind of adventure setting, just with my own total party rule system. Or you can just use the setting for your own purposes with a different rule system, although there's some things about my rules that do kind of make it unique, and in terms of how you experience that. And to help you like learn some of these things about the total party system, there's an adventure module that goes with ancient Egypt that cues off the introduction in that book, called The Curse of Lord Mahoney's Fedora. Also an example of how to write an adventure where the villain is actually the players themselves, and the decisions they make real early on in the game, and how it might trip them up and complicate things as the adventure goes along, as they try to solve the mystery and lift the curse and all that kind of stuff. Another source book that goes with Ancient Egypt is Ancient Egypt Conquers Mars. This kind of like respins the entire premise. It gives you Mars back during, the year 1000 BC. It's a very John Carter-y kind of setting, mixed a bit with like a Hercules in space, Italian science fiction kind of a vibe going on. Presents a bunch of like other like alien, quote-unquote, monster races that also, and how they're represented in our own contemporary mythology as player character races, potentially. And adventure storylines and epic quests, and can key right off the other ancient Egypt books, or just be used completely standalone as a setting in and of itself, with lots of information on what Mars is like back then, and kingdoms and peoples and all that kind of shit. Next in the timeline by a hair is Cowgirls versus Zombies. It's a pretty thin book. It's the cheapest product I have, especially if you buy it as a PDF. It's only $2.99. It was kind of just a kind of filler request I got from some people who were just curious to see the rule system, but didn't necessarily want to buy some bigger, thicker type of game. And so the reason why this is cheap is it's basically just the rule section that I had already developed. A big long section out of Ghosts of the Shadow Zone, which we'll get to in a minute, about how like ghosts and spirits operate, and a a character creation system for playing Cowgirls in the year 1866. You have to fight off in a zombie horde that took over Colorado in the middle of the night one night a couple years after the end of the Civil War, and a few pages of suggestions on how to use it all. But it's not as complete because it's kind of in a way just kind of like a light sample for someone who wants to dip their toe and see if it's worth buying something else but doesn't necessarily want to invest $10 or more. So following that, in terms of like the total party timeline, would come Dracula's Carpathian Christmas, set at the very end of the 19th century. It's a prequel to Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram Stoker is a character that you actually can potentially meet in this. The whole premise is kind of silly, but can also be like a bit twisted and dark depending on how you run with it. But it's basically Christmas elves and vampires and werewolves trying to help grant Dracula's Christmas wish so that the kids of Transylvania can have a Carpathian Christmas, as it says in the title. So, a little holiday thing. Ghosts of the Shadow Zone. Probably the most serious of the role-playing games I have. This is a core book. It's like a 1970s World of Darkness light. Player characters can... it's focused from the beginning as if people are going to be playing ghosts. And, most of the information in this is for playing, ghost characters in the afterlife. But there's also information on mortal occultists and various conspiracy groups that are, fictionalized but exist in that time period. A lot of based on, like, classic 1960s and 1970s horror tropes and that kind of thing. You got your Satanists, you got your weird Wiccans, you got, like, some sort of, like, voodoo cult that's embedded in, criminal underworld and all that kind of stuff. And because they all have interactions with, spirituality and with the afterlife and magic, there's a lot of crossover there with ghost characters. And so it's kind of the most generically formatted in terms of open-ended on exactly what you can do with this. You can run it as, like I said, kind of like a light World of Darkness kind of thing going on, especially using the source books I have for it. Or you can have it as like an incredibly grim and dark, pun intended, quite intentionally, ghost survival of just seeing if characters who recently died or are in the afterlife can even figure out how to not be destroyed by it all and hold on to their existence to at least some little degree. Its source books are Secrets of the Lesbian Illuminati, which is a college-based faction, sub-faction of one of the three great global conspiracy groups that are talked about in Ghosts of the Shadow Zone. The Lesbian Illuminati it also is kind of intentionally putting like a space within the games I've made and within the timeline for like LGBT activist characters to actually have something to do. It's set during a time period when that kind of stuff actually really was dangerous and really did mean something. So the other source book that goes with Ghosts of the Shadow Zone is The Young and the Restless Dead, which is kind of just like big lampooning of Hollywood with vampires and the Dead Actors Guild, which is a bunch of actors who've purposely turned themselves into mummies so they can maintain their youthful appearance for a couple decades longer. And some stuff with like a Bruce Lee style, stuntmen's union called the Wirefighters Union that's coming into the scene and might disrupt this careful balance between supernatural factions that are in control of Hollywood in secret. Olivia de Havilland and Zorro have a place in the setting and all that kind of stuff. It's another way to use Ghosts of the Shadow Zone, either as having characters that are playing acting mummies or directors who are vampires, or be something that a group of ghost characters learns and discovers and kind of figures out what kind of weird secrets are going on behind the scenes and behind the cameras in Tinseltown. The next game, the next jump in the timeline, is we head on to the far distant future of 1999 for Amazon Time Barbarians. Characters in this are Amazons who are saved by the ghost of Hippolyte from the destruction of Atlantis and sent forward in time to a post-apocalyptic 1999 where the human world has been devastated by video games and the incel virus that has corrupted and turned most of the males into evil trolls. Characters, can join and try to help several factions of, Hashtag Resistance and the Cowgirl Mounted Cavalry and a couple others. And the quest to take down the Rogan Joe and put an end to all the Chads and the big warlord gangs that are dominating North America and oppressing its women. It's got a quick little source book called Cage Dome 2000, Beyond Cage Dome 2000. It's 3 source books in one because it's 3 little ideas that none of which I really felt I had a ton to say, but all packaged together just to kind of give you some more fluff to outline and fill out an Amazon Time Barbarians campaign. There's a starting adventure called The Syndrome of the Stockholm Sisterhood. There's another faction introduced called the Amazon Prison Girls, about this massive prison complex that the Chads in Silicon Valley have built and have been housing a lot of women that they've been holding captive. And then the final adventure that you can use for when characters finally get to Silicon Valley and manage to find Cage Dome 2000 to face the Rogan Joe. You have the adventure outline for Amazon Time Barbarians in the Hollow Earth. So the next game in the timeline, we jump several centuries ahead to Rocket Cadets in the 11th dimension. This one's a little bit of a viewer suggestion from a fan of Escape from Planet Matriarchy, which I'll be discussing next. This one, you're playing NASA cadets in the 25th century who get sucked through a dimensional vortex into the strange and kind of Spelljammer-esque universe of the 11th dimension and have to find some way to get back and potentially stop a massive interdimensional invasion of Earth. So as I said, this originally started off as a source book for Escape from Planet Matriarchy, although I ended up including like the full rules in it anyway, so it's a standalone game. But Escape from Planet Matriarchy follows Rocket Cadets by a couple of decades. In this one, some 20th century NASA astronauts who are shot 500 years into the future crash land on the moon of Titan to discover a colony where, like, you know, ultra feminist radical terrorists had taken over the colony and have purged all the males from the population, including getting the Y chromosome entirely out of the gene pool. And now hijinks will ensue when a crew of modern human 20th century male astronauts crash land on their world and immediately destroys the delicate balance they've had to create with all these weird genetic hierarchies that they've been having to create to still keep the population going and thriving and growing. So, and finally, the source book that goes with it, and kind of like an adventure sequel to after you run through the venture in this one, you can then have Planet Matriarchy, We Want Soviet Men, where a crew from 25th century Soviet Jupiter arrives at Titan to try to open up some sort of diplomatic channels. And, well, once again, things go terribly wrong, potentially. You can also just use it as a standalone entry to the Planet Matriarchy setting, or, you know, you can combine these 3 together and kind of just do your own solar system, you know, 1950s rocket movie, early Star Trek kind of vibe setting using these books, but without necessarily having to follow the suggested adventures, because that is the joy of role-playing games, is you can do with them as you fucking want. And on that note, tell me in the comments below, you know, that you're sick of all this self-shilling bullshit. You're gonna unsubscribe right now, and then after you do that, hit subscribe again, hit the like button, share this video, you know, do things that are beneficial to yourself if you want. I don't really care. Have a good one. Happy Kwanzaa, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, other words, and stay waspinated.